So before I begin this video, I just want to start by saying that if my voice sounds a little bit weird, it's because I'm getting over a really bad cold. So I wanted to strike while the iron is hot, though, while the idea is fresh in my head, because this idea popped up in my head today, and I want to run with it. So I want to start by saying that I wouldn't say that I was necessarily a full-blown believer in Bigfoot, but what I will say is that if you had put a gun to my head at one point in my life and asked me, "Hey, is Bigfoot real or not?" And if you choose the wrong answer, the gun's going off. I think that there was a time in my life where I would have said, "Yes, Bigfoot's real," you know. Um, I think I would have wagered if I had to wager my life on it, I think there was a time in my life where I would have said yes. Um, and I guess let me just start by, explaining my background in the subject. So as a little kid, I was fascinated with all kinds of stuff that little kids usually aren't fascinated by. Like for example, when I was a little kid, I really liked to go to the bookstore, to the library. I would buy or check out books about like UFOs and alien abductions and that sort of thing. And I think when I was a little kid, my imagination kind of like leaned into that direction. I wanted to, explore outward. I think a lot of little kids maybe they uh, they grow up being really into like dinosaurs. They grow up being into like machines and trucks and that sort of thing. But for me, I really love the subject of like UFOs and alien abductions and stuff. And that's the kind of thing that really piqued my imagination. And I wouldn't say that I got into Bigfoot when I was a kid. I think Bigfoot for me came a little bit later after the whole alien UFO abduction subject got a little stale to me. I think like when I was I would have been like probably in my later teen years. I think I got into Bigfoot, um, and I started exploring the subject after like seeing a couple documentaries on the Discovery Channel. And I remember watching one with my dad, and my dad was pretty blown away by it. But in hindsight, it was just, you know, theatrics probably with some clever editing to make it seem like, stuff was happening that really wasn't. But I digress. So I remember, being a late teen, early 20 something, just, being really enthralled by the subject. There was a lot of people like Jeff Meldrum, who was a quote unquote professional anthropologist who was vouching for, like, for example, the Patterson-Gimlin film's authenticity. He would argue about all the little minute details you could see in the footage. He would talk about the mid-tarsal break on the footprint casts that were found, and he would explain all of the features on the subject of the film, and he made a very compelling argument in my mind. So, I think little by little, I became more and more intrigued by it, and all of the mysterious audio clips of the howling and all of the so-called evidence that was being collected. I want to say that, like in the mid to late 2000s, there were a couple false alarms. Like, for example, I believe there was like this policeman. I think he was a policeman somewhere in the southeast of the U.S. who claimed that he had shot a Bigfoot and he had it in his freezer and he was going to reveal it to the world. And then all of a sudden, hey, nope, just kidding, it was a hoax, which was like, I don't know what goes through people's heads and, that makes them want to do something like that, especially when it's like at the end of it, you're just going to ruin your own reputation when you do stuff like that. But yeah, there was that. And then I remember I think this happened in about 2010. There was a hunter who claimed that he had shot a juvenile Sasquatch somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. And, that was a whole other debacle that turned out to be a huge nothing burger. And I think the real turning point for me, though, was right around the time that capturing Bigfoot, no, not, I'm sorry, not capturing Bigfoot, finding Bigfoot on the Animal Planet channel came out, where the BFRO people made that reality TV show, and there was some really clearly deceptive editing done on a few episodes, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this is clearly BS. Like you're trying to sensationalize a nothing burger. Like for example, I think they saw something on thermal camera, and then it just cuts to their faces with their jaws dropped, and they don't actually show whatever it was that was on the thermal camera when it runs out. And it's like, you guys are just absolute clowns. And I think at that point is when I started to take the subject matter less seriously, because at that time I was actually active on the BFRO forums. Like I would occasionally post there, but I was mostly a lurker. And there was a time when there was like a new sighting report that got posted. This would have been probably 10, 15 years ago, I want to say. There was a post, a brand new Bigfoot sighting that got posted up on the website. And I noticed that um, whoever told this story, or whoever gave this report, included a picture of the so-called Bigfoot off in the distance sitting on a log. And I was looking at the picture really closely, and I realized that it was it was like whoever made this picture, or whoever took this picture, actually cut out um, a still frame of the Patty subject from the Patterson-Gimlin film, and like pasted it from like the butt up onto this log to make it look like there was a Bigfoot sitting on this log out in the distance. And I pointed this out to them on the BFRO forums, and they banned me. They banned me for it. And I was like, huh, that's really weird. I thought that this was about finding the truth. Why would you want all of this BS? Why would you want BS to be mixed in with legitimate reports? And I think it was right around that time that I realized that the so-called Bigfoot industry um, isn't, for the most part, isn't interested in the truth. They're only interested in bolstering a narrative. They don't really care what's true and what's not true. I mean, of course, I think they would prefer truth, wherever it's convenient. But I don't think that people like the BFRO and a lot of these other big name Bigfoot organizations and people out there, I don't think that they're too concerned about what's true and what's not true. And I think it's gotten even worse as the years have gone on, because now we have like podcasting. Podcasting is such a huge platform now, where people go on and tell these campfire type stories that there's no way of actually knowing what's real and what's not. If somebody's just a paid voice reading from a script, or if somebody's just going on there reading some BS that they made up, or if somebody's crazy, you just don't know. So I don't take anybody's stories that have been like told on podcasts very seriously. So I think that I'll just go out and say it. I think that right around the time that Sasquatch Chronicles came out and became popular is when I really started to doubt the authenticity of the Bigfoot story, or the Bigfoot legend, whatever you want to call it. I think for me, that became clear to me that most of these people are just not worried about the truth. They want to bolster a narrative. And I want to say too that I can't believe that the Bigfoot community just forgave Wes Germer for what he did. You know, years back, a lot of people realized that there were some holes in his story because, you know, he has his own quote unquote Bigfoot encounter story. And he's the guy with the number one Bigfoot related podcast in the world. And, you know, he claimed that it was a full moon on this night, but then it was actually a completely moonless night on the night in question that he had his so-called encounter. There were a lot of other holes in his story too that people were finding out, and people were leaving the show, you know, and he was charging subscriptions from people to get extra shows and that sort of thing. And I shit you not, I remember I listened to an episode of his where he was like addressing the attacks from the community, and he addressed the issue where people were criticizing him for purchasing a Hummer with all of his newfound money. And he said this. I remember him saying this. He said that he only bought that Hummer because it was the cheapest one on the lot and that he really needed a new vehicle. And it's like, that's such a non-answer. It's like you bought a Lambo, people criticize you for buying a Lambo, but then you say, oh no, but it's okay because I really needed a car and that was the cheapest Lambo that they had on the lot. It's like, come on, dude, do you think that we're dumb? But anyway, yeah, so for one, I think that podcasting has done a huge disservice to the whole Bigfoot subject, because now it's muddied the waters entirely, so that now we have no idea. We can't tell what's true and what's not true. And I'm inclined to believe now that it's all just BS. It's all just one giant human centipede of people just regurgitating the same old tired slop into each other's mouths when it comes to the Bigfoot subject. And you know, when you listen to these people's stories that go on these podcasts to tell their encounter stories, there are so many themes that keep popping up over and over. It's like my brain goes into pattern recognition mode, and it's like, oh, you're always going to get the guy who says that he could see the muscles moving underneath the hair, and you always get the guy who says that when it growled or roared, he could feel it in his chest. And you always get the guy who says that, oh, I saw it, or I could hear heavy footsteps in the brush. You know, it's like always the same structure, almost always. And it's like, man, and also when you take into consideration how many episodes these people have, of how are they finding like 2,000 different people to go on this show over a 10-year period? I don't even think that there's probably, how many people do you think have really actually seen Bigfoot or think they have seen Bigfoot? I mean, I find it a little hard to believe that there can be that many people out there who have A, seen Bigfoot, and then 2, have been willing to go on Wes Germer's show. I mean, come on. So yeah, there's just, in my mind, there's no way that all of these people are telling the truth. And if not all of them are telling the truth, I tend to lean that most of them are not telling the truth. I do want to say, though, that I think that there are a minority of people who go on shows like this who actually believe that they had an encounter and may have actually seen Bigfoot. Who knows? Like, I'm not 100% sure that Bigfoot's not out there. As I've said in another video, I'm not 100% sure about anything in this world, so I'm not going to say I'm 100% sure that Bigfoot's not real, but I would definitely not stake my life on it anymore. I think that the whole subject of Bigfoot, it's gone from like some sort of a legend, you know, and then Roger Patterson and the other guy whose name escapes me right now, who was making those fake footprints, you know, they hoaxed it for whatever reason. I think it's clear why Roger Patterson hoaxed his Patterson-Gimlin film. He and his family made a ton of money off of that. That's undeniable. Um, and there are people with a vested interest in keeping this myth alive. You know, they've staked their reputations on it. They've staked their careers on it. Um, there's just a lot of there's a lot at stake for a lot of people. And you know, I'm at the point in my life where I'm just like, nope, I'm done. You know, the water's too muddy at this point, and there's just no way to tell what's real and what's just BS. So um, I just think that it's just nothing but a cash grab for a lot of people. And that brings me to another point, actually, is that I think that a lot of people who go on like podcasts and YouTube shows and that sort of thing to tell their encounter stories, I think that even some of the people who are just telling a make believe story, I think a lot of them have good intentions. I think that in their mind, they're 100% certain that Bigfoot exists because of how much, um, I guess, garbage has gone into their brain. Um, I think that a lot of them have good intentions. They think, hey, I know this is real. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the show to tell this story, even though it's a made up story. It's going to bolster the subject matter. It's going to lend more credibility to it. So I'm going to tell this story and hopefully spread the word more. You know, so that's kind of how I see it. It's not just crazy people, and it's not just people who have had genuine encounters, and it's not just people who are malicious liars. I think that some of these people see themselves as benign liars, if that makes sense. So anyway, I don't know what I'm going to title this video. I think I'm going to title it something like My Journey from Believer into Skeptic. I mean, honestly, I don't like either of those words because it makes it sound like I totally believed it, and then I'm like, now that I totally am 100% sure that it's not true, and then I'm only here to shit all over it, which is actually not the case. Um, you know, even though I don't believe in Bigfoot anymore necessarily, I still follow the subject. You know, I still know a lot about it from my time when I was interested in it. But I just think that after all this time, we still don't have anything new to go off of. You know, the Patterson-Gimlin film was the be all end all for many people, and it's looking like it's not it's not what it was all made out to be. You know, it's looking like it was a hoax. You know, I'm still waiting for Capturing Bigfoot to come out. I'm eager to see it, but yeah, it's the conclusion that I came to several years ago was, you know, after not just looking at the video and listening to what the talking heads on the History Channel had to say about it. You know, once I started looking into it for myself and using my own brain, it's like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't smell right to me. Um, and that's what I would encourage anyone out there to do, especially if you're still in the believer camp, is to disregard what all these so-called experts say and use the brain that's in your skull. You know, that's why God gave you a brain in the first place. You know, if God didn't want you to think for yourself, he wouldn't have given you a brain. So, you know, make use of that brain that God gave you and look into stuff on your own. Um, Especially with wild claims like this, it's really important that you look into stuff for yourself and come to your own conclusions. You know, you don't even have to believe me necessarily. Just I just hope that I at least planted a seed in your brain to get you to look into stuff on your own and not just look into what other people say. You know, I hate to I hate to bring this up again, but you know, if the Patterson-Gimlin film does get proven to be a hoax with beyond a reasonable doubt, that means that a professional anthropologist, Jeff Meldrum, was fooled by it as well. So, you know, it's not looking good. Um, so I would just encourage anyone out there to look into stuff more. Don't take people's word for it. Um, Not all of these podcast guests. It's in my mind, it's numerically impossible for all of these podcast guests to be telling the truth. So right there, that should be your surest sign that something fishy is going on. And you know, after all these decades of scientific research, we still don't have anything definitive to go by. Um, and it's day by day, it's looking less and less likely that it's a real creature out there. And I don't want to get started on the whole paranormal aspect of Bigfoot because to me that's cope. You know, I think that this was never a paranormal pursuit. Bigfoot was never a paranormal pursuit until I think there were a segment of Bigfoot believers who were getting impatient and they were desperate to pin something on it. They were desperate to explain why we can't find Bigfoot. And I think to me, the simplest explanation is that it's just simply not out there. And there are people who say that every culture around the world has stories of these so-called wild men and similar creatures to Bigfoot. But it's like I said in the other video I did that I think that the subject of Bigfoot can be solved using anthropology, but not solved through physical anthropology. I think this is a subject that can best be explained through cultural anthropology. There's something deeply embedded in the human psyche that that wants to believe that there's something like this out there. It's still that wild part of our DNA that's still inside of us that wants to believe that there's some scary shit out there that could, grab you if you wander into the woods, that sort of thing. So to me, I lean now towards this being a cultural anthropology question. So anyway, if you're still hanging around, please let me know what you think, what your take is on the subject matter. If you want to roast me in the comments, that's fine too. That'll drive engagement, I guess. But yeah, let me know what you think. And if you liked the video, please give it a like. And if you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. And I'll see you on the next video.